Good evening again. We met slightly earlier, so I'm still doing the same job. I'm the co-head of global physical trading at SOCAR. Obviously, I think one of the things that are important that today SOCAR as a state oil company has sustainability as part of its core values, and we as the trading arm of SOCAR are aiming for the same, and we will do a lot of work on that. When talking about the carbon neutral cargoes or green cargoes, or there are different names for it and they fall under different criteria and could be evaluated under different criteria. Depending on how you count, within the last 3 years, we've probably seen only 30 cargoes which could be labeled in that way, pretty much on the LNG and crude and condensate side. However, this year, we saw the first crude cargo. That was a project where Macquarie, Oxy, and delivered to Reliance in India. That was called as carbon neutral oil, first shipment. Then we saw also Lundin, our colleagues from Lundin, which I think are mostly pioneers in that sector. So a lot of things that Zomo said are rather very unique than common in our sector. Doing also a carbon neutral cargo, but it was more, the questions of certification and verification were much more addressed. Just recently, also in September, with first China taking its first carbon neutral crude oil. It was done by Sinopec, COSCO, and the Chinese airlines. And altogether on the crude side this year, we probably saw 5 to 6 cargoes from what we can record. And 3 of them are done by Lundin, and we probably hope to see more by the end of the year. And now the question is this a lot? Is it too little? We're back to 99 million barrels a day consumption globally. And 3 cargoes that don't seem to make a big impact given where we stand today in our climate challenge and what we do about it. They're much more done on the LNG side, but if you look into it also, I wouldn't say that this is in any way criticism, but in reality, most of it are done by the same company, which is a good thing for the company and for the business. But on the overall scale of the global physical cargo trading, it seems still very little. So what do I really think, right? I think that's important because otherwise we would not make an input and not make a change. I think it's very important, and on the positive side, that you are part of that trend. I encourage traders, fellow traders, producers, refiners, shippers, financing entities, whoever are the stakeholders of that process, to be part of that. Because this is happening. This is unavoidable. How it will happen and how it will develop in future, it's still unknown. And as mentioned already rightfully by my colleagues, there are so many questions in this because everyone has their own little area in which they're specialized, and then there's still very little number of places where all this is built into one chain. But I do encourage you to be part of it because you want to exercise that. You want to be ready for it tomorrow. It is part of our business, and it's probably going to grow much quicker than we expect. Another positive side of it is the public relations, the PR side of it, right? It is good for your companies, it is good for your community, it is good for your environment, it is good for to be part of that today. Because if you're not, that means that, I guess, in today's world, if you're not striving to be part of that, we're a little bit behind in our thought process. And the third part is actually real, it's the financing part. Today, financial institutions like green transactions. They are encouraging you to do so. You will get some benefit, depending on with whom you're dealing, on doing such transactions. As always, there is a negative side to it as well, and it raises quite a lot of criticism and questions for transparency, or a very popular term as greenwashing. If you offset your emissions on the crude, does it really become a green cargo? Your oil becomes greener or not? And I think a big part of it, and my colleagues will talk about it more, about the voluntary and compliance market and how it works in terms of credit, but what type of credits you're using to offset your emissions? which credits, how transparent that is. And that is another big question that needs to be addressed. Because the third point on the negative side, there is a general lack of global standards for that today. There are standards, but there is no unification of standards. A lot of people will use this or that, and there are some positive trends in that today, but I hope that after COP26, we see some more unification that than we have today, because the pace, I think we need to catch up on that a bit. So what do I really think, right? I think that today, strong push should come not only from the regulators, which are trying to today realize their role and doing already a lot of work on that, but I think it's also fair to say that we see disruptions on the regulation side, right? I think a good example, and it's not about politics, but it's the reality, let's say presidency of Donald Trump. Him stepping out of Paris Agreement and Biden coming back to it within hours after he accepted presidency is a big example of a disruption, of a black swan event, if you wish, or it happens, right? And it will continue to happen, hopefully less going forward. But this is a very big example as one of the biggest economies, emission producers, oil producers, gas producers, consumers, can have such a big change of heart because there is a change in politics. I think that it is a big responsibility of consumers today, and not only on the corporate level, but also on individual level, to promote the idea of carbon neutrality and being responsible for our emissions. I hope we get to talk about it a bit more in the future, but without accepting that responsibility, the change will lack the personal element that we all carry in our lives every day. And I think that together with regulators, that will be a big driver. It is important to say that people and companies care about it, they address it. We as SOCAR talk to our clients a lot about the possibilities of carbon neutral or green cargos. We discuss how it could be done, how ready they are. But I somewhat come back to the point raised by Elsa earlier, that if you look at the oil sector and the refineries, today, when they have been struggling with margins for the last couple of years and finally recovering some profits today, it is not one of the biggest priorities on their agenda in terms of their commercial cost allocation. And it is a big question of who is paying that cost today and who will be paying it tomorrow when there are more regulations. I think when I talk to fellow traders, and that's probably one of the useful inputs I can make tonight, is that refiners, traders, no matter which company they represent, they care about the subject, they want to be involved, they realize it's important, but most of them, or some of them, at least on the side that we deal with, are not set up to do it. They don't have, let's say, direct instructions to do it, which is also not necessarily, again, a negative thing. Maybe it is done elsewhere in the same company, because it is important, as an example of Lundin, you can reduce your footprint at your production levels, you can reduce your footprint through different optimizations in your company, and that's why maybe offsetting your credits today, which is not an obligation, or offsetting your footprint today, which is not an obligation, is not also on the front line something that we see a lot. But the trend is definitely positive. We witnessed that. We are following that closely and we're acting on it. We have dedicated teams which are growing to do that. And we're not the only one in the sector, obviously, but definitely on the side of SOCAR, it is maybe some criteria that are important on our consideration about the carbon neutral cargoes is that a big part of it should be backed by the nature-based projects, because that's what we strongly believe in. And I guess we'll hear about it a bit further, but the nature-based project is something that we see big shortage probably coming in the coming years. And you have to look at it as a way to facilitate cash flow from emitters to the people who actually try to fix this or try to create some kind of balance. So that's one of the angles which we can look at. I think I'll stop here, and I want to thank you again for being here, because we're all here to care because we care. And I really hope we can make a change in the companies we work with, communities we live in, and in our everyday life. Thank you very much.